Christina from is labeled as only the USA wants to talk about how to keep religion out of addiction.
Very interesting.
Christina, are you there?
I am.
Welcome,
Hi.
Christina. Thanks for calling in.
So I am a theist. I am a pagan. I believe in multiple deities. I've been watching your show for a while, and I agree that, you know, the Abrahamic faiths don't really match up. So being a nurse, I see a lot of people that have addiction issues. I work in corrections. I've worked in drug and alcohol rehab. And we go through the DBT process, which is kind of a thought-stopping process where you take responsibility for your actions. And I see a lot of people go through the 12 step and they relapse. And when you talk to them, it comes to, well, you didn't pray hard enough, or the devil got to you. Instead of taking accountability for your actions, like instead of not going to the open bar wedding, the devil tempted you and you went to the open bar wedding, so you relapsed and you got a DWI and you got in trouble again. Instead of somebody saying, well, I didn't go to my ex-boyfriend's house, who used to be my dealer, and now my sister is saying, you're weak, you're pathetic, when I knew my limits and I didn't go to my ex's house. So how do you guys promote taking religion out of that aspect and instead saying you're accountable? Because seeing people relapse is pretty hard to see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but I think what I've seen in discussions with people about accountability and about whether or not God is responsible for certain wins and losses is, I think it helps to start with convincing them that they're responsible for their wins as often as they're responsible for their losses. So instead of saying right off the bat, like, well, you need to take accountability for your relapse, it's more of a, I don't think God deserves credit for your wins. I don't think he deserves credit for the 3 days or the 2 days or the 1 month that you were sober. I think you deserve credit for that. You know, I tell people this regularly when they say, oh, thank God for this house. And I say, you're thanking God that you knew your budget. You have the job that earns that amount of money. You went to Zillow. You typed in your budget. You typed in the area you need to go. You set up the tour. You toured the house. You're thanking God for all of that. Was that God or was that you? I think it's easier to start letting people take accountability for their wins and for the things they can do. And then once they've gotten a hold on that and they're more likely to say that they deserve credit for that, they'll be more likely to hear you out when you also try to get them to take accountability for their losses. It's like, so now that we agree that you were accountable for all those good things that happened to you and all those positive moves you've made, let's talk a little bit about how we can now take accountability for the decisions we made that put us back here in this arena, kind of back in this, without calling it like a failure. It's like the same exact person who you can now give credit for all those great things that you're doing. Let's give that person credit now for the ways that they can work towards improving themselves and give themselves credit for, yeah, you did go to that wedding, that wasn't the devil. I think we can agree if you were the one who toured that house and got that house, you're also the one who decided to go to that wedding and didn't have to go to that wedding knowing that it was open bar. Richard, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I agree largely with you there, especially on the on the affirmation part. Getting people to understand that it's their it's their hard work, it's their skills, it's their mindset which has got them where they are, that have got them that positive results. I've had these conversations with people in my own life, who've been religious and have given God the credit for all the great things they've achieved. And that is one of the things that so frustrates me when people do that. And I think it's so important to get people to realize that it's you.
Yeah.
You've done that. God didn't do that for you. You did that yourself.
Yeah.
And, take responsibility. It's, we can say, it's easy to say take accountability to somebody for mistakes they've made.
Right.
But it's so important to say take responsibility for the achievements you've gained, because so often people don't do that. So often people will, give credit or praise to something outside of themselves for that. It doesn't have to be God, it can be anything. But people do that all the time, and they should be taking, real pride in what they have achieved themselves. And if one day you take a step back and you fall, just accept that as part of the journey.
Yeah.
And we that's what life is.
Right.
Nothing in life is rosy all of the time. And for anybody, everybody has, pitfalls and stops along the way, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's in your work, whether it's just in your personal interests. Everybody has pitfalls along the way, and just accept them, learn to accept them as part of this journey you're on. And I think when you do that, when you get into that mindset and you can give yourself that credit for the things you have achieved, you move so far beyond that kind of childish. I was going to say childlike, but I think it's more childishness that it seeks to give someone else credit for your hard work.
Right. And I think the only thing more toxic than blaming all of your problems on the devil is blaming all of your losses on yourself and all of your wins on God. I think that's the only thing that could possibly be more toxic. Is anything positive that happens to you is God, but anything negative that happens to you is entirely your fault. And because the church already does such a great job of victim blaming. If you don't hear responses to your prayers, it's because you didn't pray enough. If you don't get the miracles in your life that you've been wanting or that you need, it's because of something you're not doing. So if you build people up to believe in themselves enough to credit themselves with their wins and their achievements, even the smallest ones, I think they'll be more likely to take ownership for the losses, because they can see it from both perspectives. They can say, okay, yeah, I worked really hard and I did that. I let my, guard down a little bit, or I did something irresponsible and this bad thing happened, as opposed to praise God for the good things, but it's all your fault for the bad. Christina, I don't know, does that answer your question, or is that helpful?
Yeah, I think it's really heartbreaking to see that blame. And yeah, like you said, they should be celebrating the wins as well.
Yeah.
Christina, as a theist, how would you respond if we weren't talking about a third party, if this was you in your own life, how would you kind of take this? If when you achieve something, would you give any credit to the gods that you believe in? Would you kind of give them thanks for giving you strength to be able to achieve something? I'm just interested in your kind of take on it.
Great question.
I do. And I celebrate, and I'll put out, bowls of food for the deities that I appreciate. And whenever I stumble and fall, and it's like, okay, thanks for the lesson. I'll see what happened. How can I use this to improve? Because I know that, things aren't necessarily handed to you, and I see the deities as they're guiding them, or they're guiding you. And
what would you say is the difference between that and somebody blaming the devil for their slip-ups or their relapses?
so I just, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Yeah, because I think in my mind, that even if you're also thanking them for the positives by considering anything negative that happens a lesson you're supposed to learn from, I think that might be something that you can reflect on as well and say, is this a lesson I need to learn from? Or is this something that, like a decision that I knew had consequences if it went awry, or something I should have prepared for more? I don't know. It's an interesting thought to wonder the difference between Christian gods and demons and devils being blamed for things versus other religions, other theist beliefs.
Yeah. So I don't believe in the devil or anything like that. And so I just think that it's kind of the entity that everybody likes to poke and blame. And instead of taking responsibility, they just say, oh, that's, the devil, or it's the Satan. Instead of taking accountability for, well, I did a bad thing or I messed up.
What would you say is the kind of, if we're going to use a term such as yardstick, then between the difference between, rather than, answering directly about, I think that, I do this in my own faith, I do give credit to gods. What would you say, what is the independent yardstick, which is outside of your faith and outside of these theistic faiths with devils and demons and things? What yardstick would you say is there to say that this is something that we can take, we can say, this is something that I have achieved, that I've not used help from a deity from? And what would you say is the criteria that deity has to meet with that yardstick to give that praise, to give that deity affirmation, to give it the credit for that thing?
I don't really have anything that I could use, I guess. I understand that it's kind of like make-believe. It just leaves you with a good feeling, but there's really nothing that I can point to and say that's a god or something like that.
Do the deities that you believe in punish as well, or do they only do positive actions or teach lessons meant for the positive?
I believe they only teach lessons for the positive.
So if somebody in recovery said what happened to me this weekend, the slip up I made this weekend was just a lesson for me to learn from, as opposed to it was the devil's fault, it was this, it was that. If they said, I do think the devil did that, or I do think God did that, but they did it to teach me a lesson to not do it again, would that be better in your opinion, or would that be still problematic in any way?
Thinking about it, I think that it would be better, but I can definitely see what you're saying, because they're kind of the same parallel, if that's what I'm understanding from what you're saying.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole, even if they're seeing it in a positive light, I think that lack of accountability is still there from my perspective. Even if you are thanking a deity for teaching you a positive lesson, you're still not holding yourself to accountability.
Okay.
Yeah,
your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, I just want to say, Christina, look, I've enjoyed this call immensely.
Yeah, this has been awesome.
And I think it's great when we get to talk about subjects that we can kind of look into and explore together, rather than just the I'm right, you're wrong kind of calls that we so often get. And I really, really appreciate you calling, Christina. I think I would recommend that you listen back to this call. You'll listen back to some of the questions myself and Sydney have been asking you, and kind of really off air within yourself, really take the time to chew them over and have a think about them, so you're not on the pressure of doing it on a phone call and, when there's thousands of people listening. Do it in your own time. Take that time to really have a think about it. Think about what those yardsticks are that you use. Think about what it is about your gods, and the affirmation which you give your gods, which might be different to the affirmations that Christians give their gods or Muslims give their gods, and really kind of chew over if there is something different there, if there is something independent which you can say, look, this is what my God presents, and this is what can be demonstrated to be a positive effect that the God gives me, rather than something I do myself, which I then, shine onto my God as though it's the God that's done it. And have a chew over that and give us a call back and let us know where you go with that. Because I think this is a really, really interesting kind of conversation we can have kind of long term and kind of follow your progress and take this conversation a lot further. I'm going to let you go, Christina. Thank you very much for calling. That, Sydney, was an amazing call to start the show off with.
Yeah, I think something that we touched on there that I don't think is addressed often, if ever, is that accountability isn't just taking accountability for your mistakes and your problems, but accountability is also taking responsibility for your wins. And whether or not you say, I drove drunk because the devil told me to, or you say, I got a DUI because God's teaching me a lesson to improve myself, while that's a more positive spin, that's still not taking accountability. So you can miss the opportunity to take accountability in ways that aren't just blaming yourself for the worst of everything, but also not giving praise to something that doesn't deserve praise, and also not spinning the things that you did wrong into a lesson from God, as opposed to, or maybe you just drove drunk, or maybe you just did the thing, and so we think a lot about accountability as stop blaming the devil, you did this, instead of stop giving credit to God for teaching you a beneficial lesson when maybe you did this. And I thought that was a really fantastic thing topic to broach. We really don't hear that very often. And I really appreciated her call.